Well, we appreciate you joining the podcast and taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us about chemicals and the smart human and all that good stuff. So for our listeners, can you introduce yourself and let everyone know what your education and medical background is?
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks so much for finding me and having me on your show because I always like to reach every kind of audience, right? Everyone deserves to know what goes in their bodies, goes on their bodies. Everyone needs to know the lack of regulation in this country. So I really wanted this, I'm glad that I'm on your show. So I'll just give you a brief background, as brief as I can be. So I'm a conventional doctor for, I don't know, 20 odd years. And then I find out after my dog gets sick that, I'm thinking what made him so sick? Maybe there's some reason for it. So I kind of started looking into chemicals and what could, dog food, plastic toy. So I'm a conventional rheumatologist, not really paying much more attention than my field. And I get thrown into this world of what's in our environment and how could it be affecting my dog. And the more I started looking into what could have made him sick, I started realizing or unveiling like this Pandora's box of holy moly, like, why didn't I learn this in medical school? How did I not learn the limited regulations on just drinking water, or that no ingredients that go into our personal care products, our cleaning products literally require any testing for safety or toxicity, like let alone babies, let alone pregnant women or immune compromised people, but literally no testing is required before these products have, add ingredients. So it's a, proprietary, manufacturing world in our country in terms of the laws. And so rheumatology led into environmental health, as this is called, how environment, and it could be a lot of things, not just chemicals, it could be radiation, stress, noise pollution, air pollution, anything in our environment that affects our health is environmental health. And of course, I got trained, within that same period, I was already training for integrative medicine for 2 years with Dr. Andrew Weil and all his colleagues. So all three of these worlds sort of came together, and that's sort of what I'm jumping off of now is how do they all intersect? Why is it so important that we connect all of these things? And then really, how can we get healthier and better from knowing this information?
So what's the number one way you're attacking this? Because there's what we consume, which you talk a lot about, and then there's what we put on our skin from a daily perspective: lotions, shampoos, deodorant, washing our clothes with soaps and detergents. So what's kind of the number one thing that you're hoping to attack?
So, to be honest with you, having done this now 12 years, I've gone full circle from, oh my God, to sort of like, we all live in the real world. We have to, take our kids, onto sports turf to play soccer. We have to, fight with our kids about food and ourselves. I've really kind of come to believe that the simplest way to describe the problem is really thinking about what goes in, on, and around your body. Very, very simple, in, on, and around. And that's actually the TED Talk really tries to encompass what I'm trying to say to people is that, what you put in your body is what you eat, but also what you drink. And water has become a major conversation for me because I've just, it's risen, no pun intended, risen to the top is a really big, big topic that no one's paying attention to. But in is what you eat and drink. On is what you put on your skin, as you mentioned. So it could be anything from what you intentionally put on your skin, like cosmetics and personal care products, body sprays. Men and boys are not immune to these exposures. Shaving creams, and to what's around. I should say also in and around, you should also be thinking feminine care products because that's the vaginal canal, which a lot of people don't even pay attention to, and women should because of their lifelong history of that exposure area. And then what's around is, air spray, air fresheners, things we purposely put into our air in our home. And then things that are not purposely put in, things that aerate off, like for instance, cleaning products. Once you spray them on a surface, they're going to aerate off. Those chemicals just don't go nowhere. They either get into the air you breathe or your kids breathe. They get onto the floor. They end up in dust pockets. Actually, dust is one of the major, areas where you can make a big dent in removing a lot of chemicals, especially if you have pets or small children, because dust and all the chemicals that end up in dust will get on their paws, on their fingers. They'll stuck to sticky, wet toys. So, the way I look at this topic is you can't scare people away from doing good things. It's very easy to freak people out. But it's really got to be done in sort of a way that fits into your lifestyle in terms of removing them from your environment, because it's a journey. I mean, I'm still on this journey. I totally threw myself under the bus on my TED Talk because I had to be honest. I still color my hair. I still eat junk food, not a lot, but certainly it happens. So there's no one perfect in this story. And I think the more reasonable changes, practical changes, not costly changes you make into your life, the more these chemicals remain outside of your body, at the very least, outside of your home, which is the best place to control anything, right? You can't control everything. Schools are not that easy, on the highways and shopping centers, but you can control a lot in your home. And that's actually how, and I'm going to plug the book, not because I even get any money. Pretty much it's from Oxford University Press. So I really don't get much of anything at all. But the idea is that this book was written through Oxford, same with the textbook, because they're the most legitimized educational resources, and that was worth it. And this book was a process of about 7 years put together into what you should do. What are the most practical, cost-effective, changes we can all make, at the pace that you're willing to go, and realize that they're all positive changes, even if you're not entirely sure of how it's going to play out in your health, which we can talk about.
I saw like an old commercial from Monsanto's, and I forget what the tagline was: living better or living healthier through chemicals or something like that. What is it?
Yeah. I mean, they were in the 50s. Monsanto was huge even at the World's Fair, I think in 1950 something, they had a whole exhibit on Monsanto's chemicals. And, listen, I have to say, and there's a whole chapter, the beginning is like, how did we get into this pickle? I mean, really, how did we get here where we have 95,000 chemicals that are allowable in everything we do? Like, how did we get here? And the vast majority of these chemicals came after the 1940s and 50s, after World War II. What was the goal? The goal was to, reduce the use of resources like wood and steel, and all these natural resources were hard to, to access and to put into use. So they came up with plastics, and Monsanto was instrumental in some of these major chemical moves, one of which is plastics, pesticides. All the chemicals in the 1950s were really to prevent, well, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of them were used for soldiers abroad. How do we keep them from getting malaria and all these infections? How do we make planes lighter, plexiglass on fighter on fighter planes? Those are not necessarily glass. I mean, they're heavy, but there was all these different moves to create better materials, as they framed it. The downside is that once these were allowed and released and marketed as convenient and better for housewives, when you dropped a plate, it wouldn't shatter. No one thought about the downstream effects. No one really figured out the full life cycle of these chemicals. And now we're dealing with it, how many years later, 70 years later, we're dealing with the PFAS chemicals, the non-stick chemicals that are in drinking water, making a lot of news. Chemicals like BPA, which is, lines every canned food, organic or not. It's used to prevent the metal of a can, getting into the food or drink it carries, but also in case the can is dented. So, there was a lot of interesting stuff this was all used for, but no one really thought about the life cycle of these chemicals. How they affect human health was never required for testing, because they do get into our bodies, and we didn't know that until about 25 years ago. So, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. And instead of waiting for, my colleagues who do a lot of work on Capitol Hill to really fight for these chemicals never to be made in the first place, green chemistry is that movement to get smarter, better chemicals into our lives if they're less toxic, but those people spend a lot of time, fighting it out. And I just found that my lane was, as a clinician who sees so many sick people, that's related to environment, right? Thyroid conditions that were never really an issue in young people, autoimmune diseases. As a rheumatologist, that's what I deal with is, rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and Crohn's and MS. And I mean, the list, there's like 170 autoimmune diseases. Those are new diseases. It's not because doctors are just getting savvier at figuring it out. We've got sicker people at younger ages, and we have to think about this. Even like, obesity, those are related to chemicals. Obesogens are a group of chemicals that are absolutely found to increase the size of adipose cells, fat cells, and then other mechanisms. Phthalates, which spelled with a PHTH. Those are a group of chemicals, dude. They literally create infertility. Yep. They affect, boys' genitalia. They affect, it's remarkable. And instead of, there's so many thousands of classes, but the idea is to give people a piece of what the problem is, how it affects our health. And then in terms of this book, which the whole purpose is how to get them out of your body, how to keep them from getting in your body.
Is America the only country that has as many crazy ass chemicals as, because I feel like other countries ban, like I always hear like, Canada bans X, amount of chemicals and Asia bans this, but
Germany,
Europe, But hey, this podcast episode is brought to you by BCN Supplements. BCN Supplements is a Texas-based company that produces and manufactures everything right here in the great United States of America. The good thing is BCN caters to every single person on the fitness spectrum, whether you're a seasoned hybrid athlete, kind of like myself, or you're a newbie just now starting to pay attention to your health, kind of like Mike. BCN has what you need to make a healthy choice. Lately, I've been using BCN's pre-workout mix. And to be honest, I'm not really a pre-workout guy because I don't like the way most on the market make you feel. The crash and that tingly feeling. But you don't get any of that junk with BCN's pre-workout mix. I've noticed I had more focus during my lifts and more energy to carry through my longer workouts. And that pump you get is it's amazing. Drop what you're doing right now and go to bcnsubs.com to place your order today on this pre-workout mix. They got vitamins and they got collagen, and be sure to use promo code CWJM to receive 10% off your next purchase. BCN Supplements, helping build a better you from the inside out.
Yeah, great question. Absolutely great question. So, United States is like the worst, right? If you want it, there's just no restrictions on, we have restrictions on the FDA in terms of chemicals in as medicines. By the way, medicines have their own issues. We're not going to have a whole another 3 hours for that. Although I have a chapter in there on medications, the most common, like statins and, reflux medicines like proton pump inhibitors and what they do and what are the alternatives. But I will say, in terms of what the U.S. is able to regulate, it's nothing really other than medications. They cover only 91, the United States under the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974, which really hasn't changed much, by the way, since 1974. Only 91 chemicals are looked for in all of the 160,000 wastewater treatment plants in the United States that clean our water, that serve 84% of the U.S. population. The other 16% is wells, right? Because there's so many remote areas in the United States. What's intriguing is that no one realizes that 91 chemicals doesn't even touch the surface of 95,000 that can get into our water. And that includes, waste runoff from manufacturing, dead animals, fertilizer, pesticides, anything that lands on streams and lakes is fair game for a wastewater treatment plant to come out as water at the other end. Same with aquifers that run under our soil. There's huge aquifers. It's almost like rivers under our soil. Anything that makes its way down to the aquifer from, we have now floods and we have hurricanes and things that disrupt the soil, that too goes in. And also sewage. Like there's some crazy stuff people don't realize. Like our sewage becomes our drinking water.
Yeah.
And, there's medications found in our sewage, such as, oral contraceptives, which I'm sure you guys would be psyched to drink. Medical, like hypertension medicine. Look, the psychotics and antidepressants, I'm like, woo, that could be good. But I'm just saying, hypothetically, we really don't get how dirty our water is, even in, we're not a third world country, but we're not far off from having some pretty bad issues. And sorry, back to your point about other countries, Europe has a much more rigorous mechanism, system of vetting chemicals before they go into the products that they use. And so they've taken upwards of, I think, 1,300. I guess every year there's a certain number that add to the list that they cannot use in commercial products. Many companies, big companies like Revlon, I don't want to speak to too many because I don't want to get it wrong, but I know they are one of them, can literally produce cosmetics and personal care products for the United States and then a different version for Europe. So, I mean, why? But it's true. And so the question is, who should we be following? Well, certainly the European Union, definitely. Canada has a much better system. Certainly California. I mean, Prop 65 is legislation that, they're way ahead of the curve in trying to get some of these chemicals out of our food and personal care and cleaning products. So, we have a long ways to go, but California certainly, sort of sets the pace for this country to keep moving. It's never going to catch up, which is why my urgency, my passion comes from, let's do this now for yourself. Don't wait for the laws to change because it's not going to change. It hasn't changed. We've only removed, I think, somewhere between 5 and 11 chemicals in 60 years from our environment, our system. DDT. Some people, you'll recognize some of these PCBs are in our ocean, but they're basically insulator chemicals that have washed into our oceans. So 5 or 7 or 10 chemicals is not enough to hit the 95,000. And then understanding what each of these chemicals and how much end up in our blood and how fast they break down in our system, like some break down in 6 to 8 hours, like BPA. So you can try to really remove those from your system. And then there's the PFAS chemicals, which really take, maybe even up to months and years, depending on which chemical compound. So any which way you look at it, we got to be cleaner. Our bodies have to get this crap out because we didn't evolve this way. We didn't evolve for, 4.5 million years of human existence to have 95,000 chemicals in only the last 75 years. It's just cray cray.
It's funny. I think there's always people kind of looking further into this, but for the masses, I think it kind of became apparent to them when through marketing. I think we have so many companies, and so a marketing strategy was, hey, you buy these cups that are BPA free. So people are like, what the fuck is BPA? Yeah. And so they start buying these things. You
know what it is to be afraid of it.
Yeah, but they're like, I don't want it if it's not good. Or like Taco Bell came out one time and they're like, hey, now with real beef, you're like, what the hell was I eating before?
So now, a cat? Like, what was it?
Yeah. So the people are getting more conscious to this whole thing, and they're asking questions now, and I think that's good. But I was gonna ask you, like with water, what are we unable to get out of water? Like as far as treatment, what are the things that will never get out of water?
Great question. And to your point where you said, people are becoming more questioning of what they eat and what they drink and all that, because in my opinion, at least maybe my vantage point is that people are sick. People are getting sick and they're wondering why, because Aunt Susie and my dad and mom, they didn't have that. Or, like people are starting to wonder why they're not feeling good, or they're gaining weight and can't lose it, or they have a thyroid condition in their teens. Like that's just not really normal, and a little bit of it is nutritional. I will give you that. But there's a lot of it that's exposure component. When it comes to water, which is literally, I guess after doing this so long and knowing that so much stuff is pretty toxic, and the goal again is the journey. It's not to just throw up your hands and say screw it. But water to me was more of a logical conclusion as to what's the most important thing to me. Most of stuff that I write about, you can just not buy. And if you don't buy it and you don't bring it into your home, it ain't going to get into you and ain't going to get into your kids. I mean, maybe at school, maybe in life, but yes, your home will not bring those chemicals in to end up in our bloodstream, our breast milk, our urine, and all the places that we test these chemicals. Okay. But water is so unique because by volume, we drink more water than we even consume food, right? You can't live after 3 days without water, but you can live like 10 days without food. we're made up of 85% water. Like, we don't even realize that. Like, literally almost every tissue in the human body is made up of water for a total of about 80 to 85% of our body. So if we're not getting that right, and we're just adding it into our body all the time, no matter how much you kind of try to get things out or detox or sweat or sauna or all these great things, you're just feeding it back in. So to me, that kind of was logically one of the most important things that I saw from a high yield perspective. Like, if you get your water right, that's a huge body burden, a big exposure avenue for chemicals that are harmful. So as I mentioned, most people get their water from municipal tap, from the 160,000 wastewater treatment plants that serve 84% of the country. And they only require this law, this 91 chemicals, where they measure up to a certain allowable level, which many people argue is not healthy either. But let's just go with it. 91 chemicals, benzene's one of them, atrazine, some of the things you recognize. And you can look online, by the way. You could just look up Safe Drinking Water Act contaminants, and it'll give you the 91 chemicals, what they do, health issues, and what the levels are that are allowed in sort of like on a daily basis for, I think, a 200-pound man drinking 2 liters, something like that. But interestingly enough, with all of that water that's coming through, and wells, by the way, have their own issue we'll get into briefly, but let's just say most of us is served by a municipal tap. Okay, number one, you're allowed a yearly report. Okay, that's mandated by law to contact your water company and get a report on what contaminants, what red flags, or some of those things that were discovered. Now, mind you, it could have been 6 months ago, could have been 8 months ago, but at least we have that is written into the laws. The next question is, well, okay, if I control the water quality in my home, should I be doing it with the fridge and like changing out the fridge cartridge? Should it be a Brita or Zero or one of the many, many water pitchers? Those are called carbon block. And so they're limited. They're better than nothing, but they're limited to how much given the 95,000 chemicals, right? So the faster water goes through a filter, the less likely it's going to pull junk off, right? So that's just a matter of physics. Now, mind you, I try to keep up to date with the shower carbon block filter, which you can get for $20 at a big box store. So that's a very good one for a shower, but you have to keep on it. It's like every 6 months. It's like, but it's a good one to think about, because you don't need a whole house filter. You really want a filter underneath your sink, in your fridge. You want something convenient. If you're moving from apartment to apartment or dorm to dorm, you want to be able to necessarily be able to take some type of filtration system with you if you're allowed to. Carbon blocks are fair to decent. There's a whole variety of them. The most extreme that I really do shout on mountaintops about, that I think people should be getting, is reverse osmosis, or RO, they call them. I wouldn't be doing this regularly if I didn't think it were affordable now. Okay, they're maybe $200, $300 for a really good one that's well certified to put under your sink. And there's a lot of them that say, oh, we're on top of your sink, we're fast and convenient, but they take out a lot less. It's all a matter of the filter component. The filter component should be made in the US. I'm told DuPont makes a very good one, but essentially you don't want that portion outsourced. When you go to a big box store, they'll say made in America, the big box of, for an RO, but then they'll outsource 100 parts in it. So you do have to do a little bit of legwork. Consumer Reports is where I got our first one 20 years ago, when I was still eating Cheese Whiz and Oreos and didn't care, right? That was like the one thing we did right when we got to a farming town in New Jersey. But essentially, they're more accessible than a lot of people think. And so I always say get one at the point of use, anything, pitcher, distiller, reverse osmosis. Point of use is where the water comes out of your faucet. Because then it doesn't matter if it comes from a well or it comes from municipal tap, it's still the water system that's coming right through your walls into your sink. So that's why RO is good for either setup. And there's no perfect system. Even my RO, when I tested it, did a very good job compared to the tap water in my same kitchen water, but it was never perfect. And that's something I worked out with some of the researchers that I was working with. There will always be some issue because of the location of where you live, seasonality, what have you, but it's the best thing we have available to consumers.
So I was going to ask you what you use personally. It sounds like you use reverse osmosis. Do you ever drink out of water bottles? Do you go and get...
I mean, I'm human, right? I go on vacation. I gotta drink water. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know how hot that water bottle was. I gotta live. And I go out to dinner at restaurants and I don't bring my water. Like I bring water, which is like insane for most people because I can fill it up at home. It's just one extra step. My kids don't. My husband thinks I'm nuts, So the idea is that you want to just do what's within your own comfort level. But I'm a realist, I think if you can do 80-20, 80% of your life, as thoughtful as you can, in control of what you can, 20% is life. And I think you don't want to let perfection be the enemy of the good. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think that, and look, if there's a, Mississippi right now, I mean, I don't know when this is going to air, but we have water stories every freaking day on the news. That's if it makes it to the news. I mean, we have major water problems in this country that won't even make the news, infrastructure, cracked pipes, bacteria that's, brain eating bacteria in this water system. And, this chemical from this tornado or flood that just got into the water system in this area. This is not a new story. The question is going to be, what do we do about it? Because it's always going to be something. And so that's where I am with this. It's just that something that is accessible. I have a whole chapter in this, but the punchline is filtration is good. Vet it out, figure it out, buy it. And actually it's much cheaper even for RO once you pay the upfront cost of a plumber for an hour to put it in, and an RO filter that's, $200 to $300 that's well vetted and certified. You're good for a year and a half until you have to, fill those, change those out maybe a year. Yeah. And they're $40 to replace the filters. It's not a big deal.
No.
I went down the rabbit hole with this one day because I don't know. At some point, I was like, I stopped using sunscreen, like putting like different shampoos. I really was conscious of this, and so we put this carbon filter on our house. We have the RO at the sink. I started using these vitamin C cartridge things for the shower, and then all I was drinking was trying to drink this. What was it? High alkaline water and
alkaline water. That's funny.
It might be a marketing scheme or whatever.
Oh, it is a marketing scheme because if you eat fruits and vegetables, preferably without pesticides, be it organic or washed off, which we talk about in the book, either one's good. But if you eat fruits and vegetables, those are alkaline foods.
Yeah.
So, in order to clean water, you have to take the whole thing and scrub it. You can't, because the actual membrane reverse osmosis doesn't know the difference between chemical or mineral or it just doesn't know the difference. So it's just a screening. It's like fishing, right? The smaller the pore size, the more the smallest particulates, like our viruses, are the smallest, really. Oh, here's a fun fact. You guys know dialysis machines. People who lose their kidneys have to go on a dialysis machine, right?
Yeah.
So my dad and my brother are both dialysis doctors. My dad actually, he's 83. I mean, he helped bring this 60 years ago when dialysis was invented. Can you imagine? Only 60 years ago to, the New Jersey area. And when he told me that they have federally required reverse osmosis water for dialysis machines and the patients, and they had that since it was first invented, that was more for bacteria and viruses because they're immunocompromised, and that was the big issue. Since that time, all these compounds have come down the pike, and they're now being, protected from those chemicals too during that dialysis, period when they're getting it done. So, the idea is that if we're doing this for our sickest immunocompromised people, required by law, managed and regulated, and he gets checks by the state every month, why aren't we doing this for ourselves, Yeah.
So with water, I guess what I was getting to is with an RO system, because, like Ozark, I think that's their process too, is reverse osmosis. So whatever, like whatever the best company, the best filtration there possibly is there still things getting through that is unfilterable? It's like, are all these medicines getting through still? Are certain bacteria getting through?
It's very limited stuff. And I wouldn't say limit. I hate to speak generally because there are some ROs that have different certifications and certain quality and certain price points. So I don't want to just speak for the RO, industry, but what I'm learning as I go with speaking to various researchers, and there's a company that tests water now that's pretty reputable. So I had them send me two kits, and I compared what was in my RO water after it's been changed out the filter and what's in my tap water to compare whether it's actually doing enough. And it scored pretty high. But one thing, and I'll just give you an example, that they said in my water that was really elevated, and still in the reverse osmosis water at a minimum level, but there was something called VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, which are chemicals that actually aerate into the air. They're volatile, so they're kind of in the water, air above the water. And interestingly enough, I already had myself a Brita or zero water pitcher for years, prior to even the RO. I just kept it because I'm too cheap to throw it away with all the drop-ins. I just had it, and it turns out that carbon block are good at VOCs. They're better. They're very good at removing VOCs. So what I do, again, call me cuckoo or not, is I fill up my pitcher from the RO filter.
Wow.
So, in that particular situation, it makes sense. It's an extra step. I don't mind it, So I'm saying there can be solutions to even your individual risks for your location, but even a study by, there's a group at Duke University, some researchers that I know, and they did a study comparing a bunch of different pitchers and a bunch of different reverse osmosis water filters. And they showed that the PFAS chemicals, the ones that are really, from Dark Waters, the movie Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo. Yep. Okay, so that's the story of this group of chemicals that affected this manufacturing town and killed off the cattle and gave everyone cancers. And it was just really pretty dramatic, and it's legit. And Bob Billett was the lawyer who actually I'm going to be interviewing in a few weeks. I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh, that's cool.
But what happens is with PFAS chemicals is that they're so hard to break down. That's their big issue. They're called forever chemicals because they are perfluorinated. So the fluorine compound actually makes it live forever because of that fluorine. And the problem with that group of chemicals, and they're used around military bases, they're used in firefighting foams, they're used in microwave popcorn bags, fast food wrappers to make them grease proof. It's the stain guard grease proof. It's like forever tough chemicals. Those are becoming so pervasive, and they don't break down in our bodies, in our environment. So they're making a lot of news. They're getting into water. And so one of the things is that this Heather Stapleton and her team, she studied how good are these reverse osmosis versus pitchers to get those out of our water. And they actually perform very well, all the ROs.
No way.
So that gives me even more fuel to this argument that, again, the amount of chemicals that get in your body through water can be directly connected to what you're doing to filter them out.
So people have to worry about water, and they also have to worry about what's sprayed on their foods too. So how much effort do you put into washing your vegetables or your meat and your fruit, and what can people do to help speed up that process?
So easiest, but not necessarily cheapest, is buy organic. USDA organic is the only food certification that has any teeth in this country.
Is that like a real... I always feel like that's kind of cheap. Like it's not really organic because it could be on a field that's organic, but still getting overspray from a field that's right next to it. Is that not the case?
I mean, I guess you could go into the nuances if you have an organic farm next to a non-organic farm. I live next to a farm. I'm sure I'm breathing. A non-organic farm, I'm breathing all that junk. But, listen, you have to do the best you can within your ability. USDA organic, and we go into it in the book in a very simple way, basically keeps thousands of toxic pesticides that are totally allowable in regular conventional farming, not allowed to not only be sprayed, but not allowed in the soil that organic produce is grown. And it's a lot of chemicals. Is it a perfect system? No, but I can tell you that it's the best we got, unless you're growing your own food and you can, use organic soil and really create all the, manage all the obstacles. So frozen organic food, people don't realize as much that USDA frozen organics, which, ShopRite, Stop and Shop, McCaffrey's, I don't know what stores you have, but a lot of them make their own. The big box stores are making, they're packaging their own USDA organic produce, fruit, vegetables. What's so interesting is they have more nutrient value in frozen foods than there is even often in fresh foods.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's interesting.
Because they have to travel. Right? So even if they're both organic, the USDA organic foods that are in a big box store may actually have traveled for weeks. In certain big box stores, they freeze like the apples for 6 months to a year in case there's a blight or some part of, some crop issue. And they have to keep that volume going. So, I don't want anyone ever to think that they can't access USDA organic food because of cost. Frozens are far cheaper, and yet they actually maintain all their nutrient value. So I really do think people should really consider that when they're making these changes, because you can also wash, certain things like asparagus are not always easy to find organic, and maybe it's not in season. When you buy in season, it's often cheaper. So you can wait for the different seasons to happen and get that. But you can take 1 part white vinegar, like cheap $3 bottle of white vinegar, and like 3 parts of warm water that's hopefully filtered or, clean. And you agitate produce in that combo, you wouldn't believe what's in the water. It's nasty. So you're getting rid of a lot of pesticide residues, even if it's not organic produce, you couldn't find it or you couldn't afford it. You can actually do your own cleaning. Baking soda can do the same thing. So, you don't need a fancy, recipe. We have them in the book. We have recipes for how to clean laundry detergent, put it together, or I don't do any of this anymore. I used to put everything together and make everything, but I'm like, whatever. But we have resources for how do you look up, cleaning products, so you can just go into a store and buy it.
Oh,
right?
Okay. All right.
You got to have both. You got to have people that are willing to do that kind of do-it-yourself work. Personal care products are in here, how to make deodorant. All these things are very simple ingredients, and they work. And, but you also have to have the resources when you're too busy and too tired and just too damn, lazy to do it. You just want to be able to walk into a store and know exactly what to buy. And it's pretty quick to go shopping in my household because we vetted everything out already. We used ewg.org as a wonderful resource to look up cosmetics and product. They have rating systems. My kid was going to summer camp and he said, and he's 13, wants to get the ladies. So he's like asking me about all these products and hair and body spray, and he's going through puberty and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah. I said, well, listen, you get on EWG, which is a great resource. There's others ones like Clearia and Think Dirty. You get on, and I said, if you get something that's like a 3 or lower, which I would like 2 or lower, but I was giving him some wiggle room in terms of the rating because 0 is the best, 10 is the worst in this EWG system. And you find it and we'll get it. And sure enough, he did the labor, he did the work, and he got his products.
Nice. I'm about to go check this website out.
You got to ask if he got the ladies. That's the problem.
Well,
you have to say that.
Did he or did he not?
Yeah, I want to know.
He did get the ladies, apparently, but he doesn't share that much with mom.
No, I wouldn't think so.
But anyway, it's doable. And I think that's the 10-year journey for me, was to get it to so doable that I didn't have to have people do it. They could just figure it out from a simple book, or podcast. I post on The Smart Human, which is my baby, the Smart Human. And I post Monday, Wednesday, Friday on Facebook, like really hearty, good stuff. TikTok now, but mostly Instagram and Twitter. Podcast is really interesting guests. So The Smart Human is something people can do, get a little nugget with what's the problem, what to do, what's the problem, what to do, during the course of a week, and just kind of maybe work through that list. It's really up to people what they want to do.
Absolutely. Really connected. I've always kind of understood, like, as far as containers and things like glass, ceramics, stainless steels, woods are like kind of the best thing. What do you typically use in your household to kind of have the best containment, and also for heating and things like that?
Yeah, you said it all. Glass and stainless steel is always a great way to go. Glass and stainless steel are a matrix that doesn't break down, whereas plastics, for example, if you were to buy some Tupperware, some plastic, food containers for whatever reason, and you put them in the dishwasher 1 or 2 times, they go from clear to opaque, like you can't see through them. And what that's saying is really that high heat, the agitation, any scratches, it's taking some of those chemicals, which are endocrine disruptors. They can affect the human endocrine system in a variety of ways. Those plastic chemicals will get into the food and drink that they carry. So it's just an example of go with the stronger matrix, glass, stainless steel. They're very accessible now. Every supermarket has these, with lids. Now with kids, we use more stainless steel because if they dropped it, I didn't want to clean it up if it broke. So, there's a whole bunch of stainless steel cups and bowls, and you can have a plastic, of course, sealed top. You can't go nuts, but then you could at least reuse it for school lunches and work and that kind of stuff. So it's just about being thoughtful and doing the best you can and not freaking out if it's not perfect. So yeah, those materials are great. And, wood has its issues. They treat wood with a lot of chemicals, used to be cyanide and some other weird chemicals they used to put on. It's like cyanide or derivative of it for play sets. And that was like a big issue is, what's the wood treated with? Even organic gardens, actually, if they're truly organic, you have to be very careful to use untreated wood because it can leach into the soil. So it's just stuff I've explored over the years. But, like I said, you can't go nuts. You just have to do little by little. First thing is easy. You just stop buying it. You stop buying air freshener, stop buying carpet powder, all the things that we've been marketed to believe to make us cleaner and better and keeping up with the Joneses. We should really be going back to what our grandmothers used to use, vinegar and sea salt for scrubbing the kitchen and, Castile soap and borax. And some of these are like, you can hardly find them in a store now.
Like lemon.
Because they're like too healthy or they're too safe.
Yeah.
But you can go back to the basics,
It's amazing what vinegar can do. I mean, you could clean rust off a metal. Like it does better than the products. Like they tested that, I think, on a show, like trying to get rid of rust, and vinegar is like killing it. Yeah, it's just a regular
and lemon.
Yeah, I think lemon is in vinegar, right? That's how you make it.
I don't know.
Well, just lemon juice is. I mean, it's remarkable if you get real lemon juice and you mix it with some white vinegar. I mean, that's one of the recipes. It's like water, vinegar, and lemon. You've just made a surface spray that's not going to kill anyone. It's not going to hurt anybody. So I think going back to a more simpler time is cheaper. It's not a lot of work and it's healthier. And I think that's what I think people are starting to wake up to, is that do we really need all of this? Where we fed a bunch of lies about, why do you need like 20 different cleaners? Even with COVID, I'll give you an example. COVID brought upon an onslaught of chemicals out of fear. Now, don't get me wrong. I dealt with COVID and I had patients who passed away and, it was pretty much a nightmare. But I will tell you that isopropyl alcohol, 70% rubbing alcohol that we grew up with putting on boo-boos.
That's like
70% or above. That's all you needed. I had it in a spray bottle. And for surfaces, that's what I use. For hand washing, I wouldn't even use wipes because you don't even need the wipes. You spray it, you rub your hands, and you've killed anything on there. So, you can get creative. You can use bleach solutions, but of course there's a lot of issues with that as well, which we put in the book. So we tried to just keep it simple and it came out, with COVID. So we definitely made commentary on all of that.
There's an argument too on the COVID side that over sanitizing our hands is actually bad because we're killing all the good microbiome all the good bugs that are on our hand and feet. Like that's bad. And it's making us more susceptible to getting viruses like COVID. So is that a real thing too?
That is absolutely real thing. So we have what's called a microbiome on our skin, in our lungs, in our gut, which is 24 feet of bowel. It's pretty much like a tube. And we have like 5 pounds of gut microbiome, which are these virus, yeast, bacteria, mold, all having a great time if they're balanced, right? This is what we evolved with, right? And we have microbiomes all over. They're just different, concentrations and balances of these different bugs. And there's literally trillions of them in the gut and on our skin. But there's also, over 700 species of bacteria that are still getting discovered. And they're not all bad for us. Salmonella is not a good guy. We've all been through that. E. coli is not a good one. And there's lots of other bad ones, but the vast majority are good. And they've been in us for millions of years and they've been on us. And once we start clearing these guys away, knocking off the skin ones, knocking off the gut microbiome ones, which are the ones that protect our gut, keep the immune system healthy, allow or don't allow chemicals across that tube into the bloodstream. That's a lot of where food allergies are coming from, things that I never grew up with. So keeping your gut healthy has a lot to do with the food quality. So you don't, pesticides in the gut is going to kill off bugs like it would on your countertop or in the field. So, it's not to belabor a big picture issue of, chemicals, illness. You got to remember there's all different mechanisms, but staying away from chemicals never hurt anybody. And that's a good thing. Stay away from as many chemicals as possible, whether you eat them, drink them, put them on your skin, use them in feminine care products. It's always going to serve you better than being around those chemicals.
Yeah.
So there's a big article that came out with freaking sunscreen and, benzene exposure and being cancer, carcinogen. Should we be using I've always been on the fence about sunscreen and why we need to use it. I know we're not outside like we used to and don't have that nice base layer, but what's up with sunscreen? Or is this something that you believe we should use? And if so, what type should we use? Because it seems like a lot of chemicals are in sunscreen.
Yeah, so there's been a bunch of media stuff about sunscreen over the past, maybe 10 years. At first it was some of the chemicals that are in propellant, which makes them spray. Certainly you want to try to avoid sprays because you do end up inhaling some of that. So no matter who you are, you could get sprayed down there and you're going to get a mouthful of it. We all know that. But the idea is that, there are chemicals that are used in sunscreens that are, again, similar to personal care and cosmetics and cleaning is there's no regulation. So it's usually the third-party researchers that are figuring this out, right? And one set of studies showed not that long ago that you could find these chemicals in your bloodstream pretty easily. That was something new for some of these chemicals to be actually in the bloodstream instead of sort of being on the skin and washing off. So that was a big problem. Oxybenzone is one of those. So they started to now move to avobenzene, which is another ingredient that's in a lot of sunscreens. Fragrances are something that are proprietary. So there could be 300-400 chemicals in the word fragrance on any bottle. So you kind of want to avoid fragrance or perfume wherever you see it on a bottle. But, then recently, a couple of weeks ago, a lot of people use, baby type of sunscreen that's like white, right? Titanium dioxide, zinc oxide, remember the lifeguards with the white nose? Yeah. Well, that's like titanium dioxide, right? So a new set of research came out saying that titanium dioxide has the potential to cause cancer in animals and mostly through ingestion. Okay. So ingestion was where the studies were done in animal studies. So it's a little bit of a stretch to humans and topically on your skin. So I want to make that distinction. But it was found to be part of a lot of candy like Skittles, God forbid, and hard-shelled candies like M&Ms. It was like heartbreaking, right? We're all like, no, not the Skittles. But it made a lot of news. It made a lot of news, right? And so the natural extension was, well, if it's in candy and it can cause problems, potentially gut microbiome issues and, stomach issues, and eventually potentially cancer. Obviously in animals, that's not humans, yet. We haven't gotten that research. Then why would it be safe on skin? Like you said, for sunscreens. And I had to kind of go through the research on this because I got asked by a couple groups to comment on this. And listen, as someone who's had skin cancers, and I'm only 49, my husband, we're all getting skin cancers because we just played in the sun all our lives. And if you were young in the sun, you often didn't have a lot of sunscreen back in the day, if you're my age. The skin cancer risk is real. So it's all about benefit risk ratio in everything we do, right? And it turns out that titanium dioxide generally stays on the surface of the skin. It generally doesn't go into the bloodstream. Avobenzene still is reasonably good as well. And, my comment was, listen, it's better to wear sunscreen when you're in the sun and remove it when you're not in the sun. Use soap and water, take showers. It's like being in soccer turf and sports turf with my kids. There's tons of chemicals in tire crumb and fake turf. I comment on this all the time. I write about it. I post on it. But again, it's how do you live in the real world? I'd make them get off and shower and wash their, get the crumb out of their ears, all the soccer players. You want to really just get this stuff off your body when you don't need it, but you don't want to walk around getting burned because those things are cumulative too. Sun exposure does actually have a 1-to-1 finding for cancer, for changing of cells. So you do want to, really be the best you can do. If you get burned, don't freak out. But remember to do better next time. And so therefore, the zinc, titanium dioxide, zinc oxide, avobenzene, there's all reasonable. And we have it in the book in terms of, things that are good and things that are bad in sunscreen. I hope I answered that question
Perfectly.
Okay.
How much merit do you put into the discussion on like rapeseed oils, vegetable oils being the culprits of most skin cancers? And that's widely touted in the carnivore world. So the people that are in the carnivore community, they say that sunscreen is bad 100%. And the reason that people are getting skin cancer so much is because of the food that we're digesting over the course of the years, which is transforming our cells when interacting with the sun and then getting vitamin and then ultimately getting cancer. How much merit is that?
Well, I will tell you, I don't like to comment on things that I don't research. And I will tell you that just on the surface, I can tell you that a cumulative amount of Cheese Whiz, Oreos, Skittles, beer, wine, stress, light exposure, overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. There's a lot of stuff that when you do things over time are going to affect the human body in so many ways. So I would say to go upstream to that is sure, certain foods absolutely can be bad for you. Today, ultra processed foods, I posted on it actually on Instagram, ultra processed foods, which are the ones that are really chemical laden, lots of sugar and BHT and preservatives and coloring and dyes and sugar and salt and all these ultra processed packaged foods, fast food, those are linked to a bunch of things, including colon cancer, amongst other cancers. I mean, this just went out in the wire. We hear it all the time, right? Junk food we know is bad for you. But I can't call out one particular oil. I can't call out one because it's usually not ever an oil alone that we're eating. It's a combination of foods that we eat over the course of a lifetime. And so all we can do, and by the way, genetics plays a role, right? Whether you get anything in life is a dance between your genetics, which is a portion of this, your lifestyle, and your environment. All three of them determine whether you get sick or not. It's called your exposome. So, what I say is try to control what you can control. You can't control, your genes necessarily. You can't control having in-laws. I'm just kidding. But I'm just saying, there's certain things you can't control. Actually, I have great in-laws. But, there's certain things you can't control. I say focus on the things you can. And, that means removing the chemicals that affect cellular disruption, methylation, genetic changes. And then add in the nutrients. There's a whole section on the book about the nutrients that actually block harmful chemicals, like, folic acid in green leafy vegetables, not taking it as a capsule necessarily, but eating food like we did for millions of years, right? Mm-hmm. I'm all on board with this movement of go back to our roots of whole foods, chemical-free foods, try to wash them, get the pesticides off. But we need to eat more the way our ancestors ate for millions of years. And that's always going to be a better way to go.
Yeah. I'd be very interested for you to do some research on that though, because there's some of the stuff's coming up. And if you really think there's seed oils in everything, so it's not like, have a balance. Because any fried food, any chips, any of these little things, everything has a seed oil. Basically, even things that doesn't seem like they need seed oils have it in a
bag or a box, basically.
Pretty much have it. Yeah. And I think someone mentioned on one of our podcasts that it has like a 3-year half-life in your cells? 10 years?
Or something like that, yeah.
When would that ever get out? It just, I don't know. It's curious. I'm curious.
You could argue, your point is well taken. I have to do more research on that. But I would say, when I think of oils, they come in with other foods. They come in with drinking water. They come in with years and years of all these other things thrown in there. So as a confounder, how do you isolate that as the entire issue?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not a big issue. It doesn't mean it's not a issue. It just means it's part of lots of other exposures too. And to really do studies in humans is impossible because you can't control for some of these factors. You can't control air quality. You can't, that's why they're so difficult to pull off. That's why they do animal studies, because you can control those. But I would have to say that if there were some really good animal studies, that would be worth looking at. No doubt about it, about what you're saying.
One thing that's hard to wrap my head around typically is like, with the earth, we only have so much water on earth. Like we don't get new water. It's just what we have is what we have, and what we're contaminating. Is there a point of no return where the water that we have and utilize is just unfilterable? And we don't have enough.
I'm not an engineer, but I would give you, I think water is going to be a big access issue.
Yeah.
Soil, by the way, we have about 50 to 60 more years on good quality soil. I mean, we have to do regenerative farming to really start to see how we can get some of these nutrients back in the soil, which means back into the food, which means back into our body, because we're very under-nutrified. I believe everyone's malnourished. That's my general feeling, because no matter how much food you eat that's healthy, you're also not sure where that food traveled, what the soil was like. So a lot of that is variable. But when it comes to water, I think this is going to be, as we can see on the news, Colorado River running out of water. And, then you have floods. People think that if you have floods one place and you have drought another, there must be enough water. It's just misplaced, right? But that's not entirely true, because the process of cleaning water that's drinkable is the issue. It's a very energy exhausting process. Middle Eastern countries, Israel, for instance, they can desalinate ocean water because it took years for them to figure that out, and other countries over there because they had to. We're not in that world because we've never needed to rely on it. Yeah. So I think the industries are going to be really scrambling to figure out, how do you get clean water that you can control instead of relying on plastic water bottles from some manufacturer, which is often tap water anyway, by the way. How are we going to have more access to clean drinking water? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a big issue.
That's funny. Yeah. Cause we have so many industries now that use water, especially like sodas, Coca-Cola, all that's used with water.
Fashion industry. Oh my God. The fact to make one t-shirt is like 100 gallons of water. I mean, that's another area where if you can reuse and reinvent what you've worn or buy old stuff. And I mean, I think that's another movement young people are moving into more so than the older people. I think people are starting to realize our resources are very thin, and that the more we can do individually, it does add up. I mean, there's no doubt that the market can move from really, passionate people banding together. It does work. It's just, and that's where I think a lot of the social media podcasts and Instagram, there's a lot of good stuff out there for young people. But yeah, I think we need to think about the whole cycle of water. We drink water, we pee water out, it goes to the treatment plants. We have fashion industry runoff water. Then who drinks that? Well, in foreign countries like India and Pakistan, there's a major problem with the dyes that are in water from fashion industry going into the major rivers that feed their water system. So it's all cycled around. And so the more you can do on your own to kind of clean up that story, I think is really worthwhile.
All this is very, I guess, for someone that's not in it and obsessed with it, kind of like we are, it can be very overwhelming. A lot of information, a lot of like, I can't do this, I can't do that. And then there's people that are saying, well, you only live once, or everything's unhealthy for you, so I'm just going to live my life the way it is. When you're talking to, your family members and friends, what's the one area that they can make a change in and see the biggest impact? Like whether it's diet, whether it's product related, what's the one area that you try to push them to, that way they can start seeing some of those benefits?
Number one is easy, is just don't buy this stuff, like walk out with half of a cart full of things that you think you needed, but you really don't, The second thing is, what you put in your body matters. It will over time determine your health in many, many ways, whether it's just weight or obesity or blood pressure, or diabetes is very prominent. 40% of the US population has either diabetes or prediabetes, which is, and they don't even know, 18% of the population doesn't even know they have prediabetes. Because people don't go to the doctor, or they get a number that's just borderline. The doctor says, oh, you're fine because you didn't hit the red mark, So look, all I can say is, I never like to end in a doom and gloom moment. I want people to feel empowered. That's why I teach high school and college, and I try to do as much education as I can, because the punchline is not, throw up your hands and say, screw it. It's really, I can do this. I just have to stop buying it. I have to stop using it on my surfaces of my home. I have to get cleaner food, whichever being frozen or, wash it myself with a bottle of vinegar next to my sink. I have to get a water filter because I think that's a really good way to go in the future. I give it as wedding gifts, these RO filters. I literally do.
That's awesome.
I don't get asked back much, but I do actually give it as wedding gifts. But I mean, the idea is that if you just work on a little bit over time, and listen, as someone who tests people's blood and urine, epidemiologic studies, I can tell you it works. It can work. I mean, organic diets have been studied for, at least a couple decades. And there's clearly a reduction in pesticides in blood and urine when tested in populations where it's tested and controlled in humans. So we do know that what you do with the choices you make can absolutely play out biologically in levels. Now, whether those levels are going to give you cancer or you autoimmune disease or you a thyroid condition, all you're trying to do is reduce the risk for developing that.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you can guarantee is a reduced risk, because there's no one can play God and say you're not going to get it,
Talk to us about the smart human. What is that? What kind of information is on there, and how did you come up with creating it?
Well, I came up with it because I remember the Dummy series and the Idiot's Guide.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I was just kind of like taking a shower and I'm like, I got to write a book. This is like 10 years ago. And I'm like, why do I have to feel like an idiot to learn something? Like, something about my self-esteem level was like bothering me with those. So I decided to start a platform called The Smart Human, so that people would feel smart, that what they did really was empowering, and added on to their other changes and stuff. So it started out of that. Plus I have an anthropology background. In college, I loved learning about how people learn to walk and what nutrients are needed. I mean, I just loved anthropology, and I think it should be actually taught in every high school or med school at least, because we didn't just plop here. We came from someplace for millions of years. This is just a small piece of our history. So the smart human was to really identify the fact that we're all human. Doesn't matter, color, religion, politics, any of it. You're a human being. So these are the things our bodies need to run and run well and healthy. So that's the beginnings of it. It's expanded over the years. It started off as something, just Facebook, because that's all I was on. And then it's kind of expanded, different personalities for different platforms, of course, younger demographics and Instagram. But, Facebook is I consider my favorite, because it's really good stuff. And it's only Monday, Wednesday, Friday that I post. So, I look at it as sort of like the deeper dive. I don't sell anything. I don't endorse brands. That makes it legit, in my opinion, as someone who really believes in, giving honest health information with integrity. I have to read a lot of stuff. And, to me, it's all health and wellness. So whatever you just, describe that, it's also sustainability, because I'm trying also to show people, even on Mondays on Facebook, I do a lot of sustainability, what's in the market, what's changing, which companies are giving up bad stuff. The idea is to show that we're all connected to what we do, what we purchase, and Fridays are Mental Health Fridays, which is usually videos and fun stuff. It's I would like to say positive, even with the context of, some pretty daunting topics. I'm always trying to give the solution, the positive, the keep on moving type of, framing of it. So I try to keep it that way. And the podcast, like I said, I'm giving voice, I think, to a lot of researchers and people who don't really have popular media after them, who do the work that we all live by. Like my partner, Fred Bomsal, he's amazing researcher. He got bisphenol A, BPA, out of baby bottles, plastic baby bottles in 2012.
Wow. He
couldn't get it out of anything else. And it's like $1 billion industry in almost all our products. But that was the one thing, there was enough epidemiologic data to show its hormone disruption capabilities. So they said, you know what? We got little babies. Let's keep it away from them. So baby bottles have no BPA. Well, he's an amazing person. He spent his whole life as the BPA guy. But, listen, I'm sure he's tired. It's like, we got to do this for ourselves. And also understand that BPA has, a lot of substitutions now. BPS, BPSIP. So in other words, it's like whack-a-mole. He worked his life off. And I mean, he's still working so hard to create papers. I mean, he's just so unbelievably brilliant. But the fact that we still allow substitutions that change the compound just ever so slightly and still can put it in all these products. So when you see BPA free, like you mentioned earlier, you really can't trust that in a plastic. You have to really think glass and stainless steel, which can't have BPA in it because it's just not made of plastic. So then you don't have to worry about anyone lying or regrettable substitutions, or because BPS has now been studied to be as bad or worse than BPA. And that's in a lot of things. So Again, it's not to freak out. Get rid of plastics in your home, like Tupperware, just switch to glass, get rid of nonstick pans, which we all love, but really just got to put a little more elbow grease into stainless steel pan. That'll get rid of some of the PFAS. Get rid of, couches. If you're up for a new couch, I know they're expensive. If you're up for a new couch, try to get one without flame retardant chemicals in them. They're no good. And I have a whole bunch of resources for where to buy them. A lot of companies make them now.
Let it burn.
So it's not as complicated as you think. And you just need guidance. And that's kind of what I'm trying to bring to consumers and everyday people.
Well, Dr. Cohen, we greatly appreciate your time. It was wonderful information. How can people follow you on social media, get your book, and all that good stuff, and just overall connect with you?
So thank you for asking. So The Smart Human is my baby. I love it even more than my kids. Just kidding. The Smart, especially when they yell at me. Okay. But The Smart Human is wonderful. In my opinion, I work so hard at it. It gets better and better as I get edits and recommendations and comments and stuff like that. But anyway, it's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now TikTok, The Smart Human. The website, thesmarthuman.com, has a lot of the podcasts that I do, say, with you. When you send me the link, I'll post that there. It'll be on my newsletter. So I'm kind of recycling all great interviews so that we can get more information out. The book, Non-Toxic Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World, is on Amazon, I think Barnes & Noble, all of those regular places, and some bookstores, not all, because it's Oxford, so limited distribution. There's certainly a deeper dive, which I don't know if anyone wants to dive into, but this is a textbook that I wrote with Dr. Vom Saal. Even before that one, that has 26 researchers that are amazing. Wow. And they contributed chapters, but that's like a real academic. That's a deep dive. So people are interested. And that's really it. I practice in Princeton, New Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. Number one state of Superfund sites in the country.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, that we got. So, yeah, if anyone needs to reach me for anything medical, certainly, they can reach out. I'm online, telemedicine, all that stuff.
Awesome. Well, we greatly appreciate it. And we'll tag you up on social media whenever this comes out.
I really appreciate it because you know what? It takes a village.
Absolutely.
It really does. So the more you share without fear and with lots of empowerment, I think that's what goes a long way. So keep doing what you're doing. And thank you so much for reaching out.